The Prologue to Revenge on the Camino. The man sat on the ground smoking a cigarette at the end of a long plateau as he peered through binoculars. There were expansive views in all directions, but he focused on a small dirt path from the east, crossing feet from where he was sitting before descending westward toward the small village of Hornillos del Camino. The late July sun was sinking toward the horizon at the end of another scorching day. Had he been there earlier, the man would have seen dozens of pilgrims making their ways along the trail, packs on their backs, some in small groups talking or laughing, others alone enjoying the solitude. More would pedal past and nod when they noticed him and his bicycle. All would be heading across northern Spain on a route known as the Camino de Santiago, which had attracted pilgrims for more than 1,000 years. Late this afternoon, though, silence engulfed the Meseta. He viewed a lone pilgrim, about a mile east, walking toward him across the long plateau, the horizon broken by a few clusters of sagebrush siding the path. Others had started their pilgrimages around daybreak to avoid the 90 to 100 degree temperatures and were now settling in small hostels and villages to the west. The Meseta owned a reputation for being the most unforgiving part of Spain. The high plain of the autonomous community of Castile and Leon, beginning after the regional capital of Burgos. It extended over 100 miles westward past Leon to Astorga, an endless array of hills and valleys sparsely blessed by groves of trees providing welcome relief for incessant sun in summer and the frequent high winds year-round. Its few villages cherished populations counted in dozens. Some walking this part of the Camino underestimated challenges of the terrain, weather, and occasional long distances between villages where potable water proved in scarce supply. They did so at their own peril. Many memorials stood over these miles for victims of the torturous conditions. The year before, a cyclist like himself suffered a stroke and died a short distance from where he was sitting. The man had hung his helmet from the handlebars of his bicycle and still sported the head wrap he had been wearing underneath. He appeared like any other cyclist who might have passed that day and decided to take a break. Although the jammers he wore and the cargo bags behind the seat of his bike were not nearly as dusty as one might expect after a full day's ride. He fixated on the approaching pilgrim until he felt a vibration from the phone in his breast pocket. He dashed out his cigarette on the ground, pocketed the filter, answered with a simple yes, listened, and then responded, "Very good. See you soon." 15 minutes later, the pilgrim, shouldering a backpack and dressed in a lightweight clothing to cover his arms and legs for protection against the sun, slowed his pace as he neared the cyclist to the left of the trail. A brimmed sun hat shaded his face. Sunglasses protected his eyes. Like many others, he used walking poles to ease the weight of his pack and provide stability in rough stretches. "Buen camino," he greeted courteously when he passed and raised one of the walking poles to touch the brim of his hat. He was about 20 years older than the man he was passing. The cyclist did not respond. The pilgrim continued onward at his slow pace in the center of the narrow dirt path as it started downward toward the village, leaving room on either side for anyone wanting to pass him. After a few minutes, the cyclist stood and unsnapped a cargo bag in the back of his bicycle. He briefly surveyed the ground where he had been sitting, glanced backward at the empty trail and across the barren landscape. Then he mounted his bike and began coasting downhill toward the pilgrim, slowly gaining speed. As he approached, the cyclist reached back and withdrew a long blade from the cargo bag. The unsuspecting pilgrim, likely deep in thought, and looking down instead of ahead, never sensed the cyclist had left the hilltop, let alone come up behind him. He did not have time to turn as the cyclist came alongside, cocked his arm with a steady concentration, and yelled, "Rot in hell, Father," with his eyes focused on the back of the pilgrim's neck. The silver blade he gripped flashed in the sun while he swung, slicing into the pilgrim just above the backpack, through his neck, and catapulting his sun hat high above. The pilgrim's body lurched forward, blood spewing from the stump of his severed neck, as his head rotated twice from the force of the blow and bounced backward onto the path, then rolled and stopped at the pilgrim's feet about the same time as his hat settled nearby. The prologue to Revenge on the Camino.